This is CBC Vancouver News.
A long-awaited return to normalcy.
Until right now, we haven't been able to hike.
How residents at long-term care homes are feeling about the lifting of COVID-19 restrictions. The wet and windy weather is causing disruptions and delays for many commuters this Easter long weekend.
It's an unbelievable disrespect.
Surrey Mounties release an image of a man they say allegedly vandalized a World War I monument last month. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Janella Hamilton. BC's move to lift its universal mask mandate in most healthcare settings is welcome news for long-term care residents and some seniors advocates. As Sohrab Sandhu reports, they say the rule change signifies a long-awaited return to normalcy.
91-year-old Evelyn Ambrose is excited to once again see smile on people's faces at her long-term care home in North Vancouver.
People are taking their masks off, the staff, and you think, oh, you're looking at a whole new person because you're only going by the eyes, and it's very nice to see their faces.
A feeling, she says, is shared by her fellow residents.
Well, they seem to be all happy that the masks are gone.
On Thursday, the province announced mandatory masking will no longer be required at long-term care homes and in most healthcare settings across BC. And visitors to care homes like Ambrose's daughter will not have to provide proof of vaccination or undergo rapid testing.
Less than 3% of our most frail, vulnerable seniors in long-term care contracting COVID are dying from it. That's less than the case fatality rate from pneumonia or many of our flu strains. During the height of the pandemic, that case fatality rate was well over 30%.
BC's seniors advocate is celebrating the move, adding it should be people's choice to wear a mask or not.
That people in long-term care are there to live their lives, and it is their home. And we need to allow them to live their life as they want to live it.
The CEO of BC Care Providers says COVID-19 restrictions have had an impact on mental well-being of long-term care residents and their families.
One of the things that we've learned through 3 years of this pandemic and its impact on long-term care was the tremendous decrease in quality of life as residents were shut off from their friends and their families. They had staff wearing personal protective equipment, including masks. That was very disorienting.
The rule change applies to most healthcare settings, including hospitals and clinics. However, some advocates believe with the virus still circulating, it is too soon to be lifting mask mandates.
Those who attend emergency departments are vulnerable. They include our seniors. They might include pregnant women. If you're attending and you're a chemo patient or a cancer patient.
The province says masks will be required in certain higher risk areas such as burn units and for patients with COVID-19 symptoms. A spring booster program will roll out later this week for seniors over 80 and Indigenous people over 70. And Dr. Bonnie Henry says mask rules may return. In the meantime, for Evelyn and her daughter, being able to visit without wearing a mask is a long-awaited return to normalcy.
Until right now, we haven't been able to hike.
Sohrab Sandhu, CBC News, North Vancouver.
The wet and windy weather across the south coast is causing disruptions and delays for many commuters this Easter long weekend. Here's Michelle Morton with more on what meteorologists are looking out for.
April showers are continuing to fall here on the south coast of BC. Special weather statements and warnings remain in place for several regions, including parts of Vancouver Island, the Sunshine Coast, the South Coast, Peace and Kootenays, warning British Columbians to brace for high winds and heavy rainfall. BC Ferries saw more sailing cancellations on Sunday because of weather conditions, including on one of its busiest routes.
We have a flight at 8 in the morning from YVR to LA, so I was just wondering what our options are.
Well, they're saying maybe the 3, maybe the 4, maybe the 5. I'm not sure. It's not sounding good.
You can't control the weather. Nobody has a hand on that. But the cancellations due to not enough crew, that's a cop-out on BC Ferries. They've got to get better.
A spokesperson was not available for comment, but BC Ferries says updates will be posted on its website. Meanwhile, Vancouver International Airport says it is not experiencing weather-related delays or cancellations. But for the Vancouver Canadians, the baseball team affiliated with the Toronto Blue Jays, a different story, as their home opener was dealt a third strike, with team officials announcing on Sunday morning the game would be canceled for a third time this long weekend. They were supposed to begin their season on Friday, but the rain pushed back play. They're next scheduled to play on Tuesday. Now, Environment Canada had warned earlier some areas could see up to 150 millimeters of rain by the end of the weekend. And while meteorologists say spring rain events like this are not unusual, they warn the rain combined with snowmelt could lead to flooding and rising river levels. Road safety experts are warning of poor driving conditions as well. The Road Safety at Work advocacy group says those behind the wheel should remember to slow down, make sure their wipers are in good condition, and have their lights on. Michelle Morton, CBC News, Vancouver.
Over on Vancouver Island, rainfall warnings are still in effect, but it comes at a welcome sight for some living in areas impacted by drought.
This rain is really, really needed. We have had a really dry spring, particularly around here. So good to see the rain come.
Volunteers monitoring salmon-bearing streams off East Vancouver Island say the water levels have risen just in time, as young coho salmon will be traveling through the waterways very soon. Surfers from across Vancouver Island taking advantage of the strong winds at Qualicum Beach.
Really love jumping. That's my favorite thing. So being in the air, it actually goes completely silent. It's a kind of really neat sensation. It's lovely. What do you? Can't ask for better, waves and wind. So.
The heavy rain caused flooding in some low-lying areas, but there have been no reports of any major damage. All right, it is time now to take a look at your forecast. Let's talk a little bit about that rainfall warning across the province. Taking a peek at our current temperatures. 6 degrees in West Vancouver, 8 at the Vancouver Airport, 8 degrees in Pitt Meadows, and 7 degrees in Abbotsford. Moving over to tomorrow's forecast. Lots of rain across the board. Dease Lake, 3 degrees with a little sun and lots of showers. Prince George, 8 degrees, again with a lot of rainy conditions. Cranbrook, you are going to see a lot of precipitation with a high of 13 degrees for tomorrow. Port Hardy also going to see mixes of flurries and rain with a high of 10. And in Victoria, a high of 10 as well for you, and lots of clouds and rain. And here in Metro Vancouver, tomorrow is going to be mostly cloudy with a high of 10 degrees. Tuesday is when we're going to see that precipitation with a high of 9 degrees. The sun is going to peek its head out on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday with a high of 10 degrees on Wednesday, 11 on Thursday, and 14 on Friday. Surrey RCMP are investigating after a statue of a First World War soldier was pushed off a cenotaph last month. As Yasmin Ranea reports, local veterans are troubled by the vandalism.
A bronze statue of a soldier kneeling, helmet in hand, atop a cenotaph with dozens of inscriptions of veterans' names missing after this monument was allegedly vandalized. Police say it was pushed off and damaged late last month.
Huge disrespect for the immense sacrifices that every serving member has done and is doing to this day in the service of Canada. And it's an unbelievable disrespect.
City of Surrey officials say it happened on March 29th, just outside of the Museum of Surrey in Cloverdale. RCMP say around 1:30 in the morning, a man was allegedly seen dismantling the statue and damaging various items outside the museum. Police releasing an image of the suspect Saturday, described as a white man between the age of 30 and 35. Police say he has a medium build, brown shoulder-length hair, and a goatee. Anyone with information is asked to contact police. A motive is not yet known, but RCMP say they are investigating the incident as an act of mischief. The Royal Canadian Legion Cloverdale branch helped raise money for the statue installed in 2006.
It's unheard of. Why someone would do such a tragedy to a landmark and to a sacred symbol of our veterans, forefathers and mothers who sacrificed their lives so that we can have the freedom that we enjoy today here in Canada.
The statue is now with the city's public art collection, getting repaired, and will be reinstalled in the coming weeks. Local veterans hoping the monument stays untouched in honor of those who fought for this country. Yasmin Ranea, CBC News, Surrey.
The concern for public transit users in the Fraser Valley continues, with many wondering when will service resume. Almost 3 weeks ago, bus drivers walked off the job demanding better pay, but as Susanna De Silva reports, with no sign of resolution, frustrations are mounting while others are forced to find creative solutions.
Despite the saying about riding bikes, it has been a steep relearning curve for Mariah Violet, complete with a couple of falls.
Twice I have. Yeah, lost balance a few times.
But it became her only option to get to her job as a housekeeper in a senior's home.
It's very exhausting. It's tiring, especially after a long 8-hour shift. The last thing I want to do is bike 45 minutes just to get home.
More than 200 bus drivers are on strike. They serve a growing population of 350,000 people from Abbotsford to Hope, spanning 80 kilometers, leaving unaffordable options, especially for those on disability.
It's a little chaos, a little uneasy, because I have to ask people to drive me around, and it takes 20 minutes or so, and then using other people's cars and gas money, and I don't have the money.
And for students who now have to pay more to get to school and work.
Because if I'm just paying $50 and I'm earning only $100 a day, I'm just saving $50, right? And the $50 is also going to be spent in grocery or rent. So in the end, it's zero.
The union says it's sympathetic.
It was a hard decision to make, but it seemed to be needed to be made for this company to hear us.
Crown Corporation BC Transit contracts out the hiring of bus drivers in the Fraser Valley to an American company called First Transit. Workers want pensions and pay equal to other BC bus drivers.
More wages compared to the other drivers in the same reason. I mean, they're making 32% more than us.
In a statement, First Transit says it has offered drivers wage increases totaling 16%. BC Transit says it is monitoring the dispute. No talks are scheduled.
I'm thinking to find another job near to where I live.
A tough choice, but one she says she can't afford not to make. Susanna De Silva, CBC News, Abbotsford.
BC RCMP are asking drivers in Richmond to avoid Westminster Highway between Shell Road and Number 5 Road following a motor vehicle collision involving a traffic pole earlier this evening. RCMP say eastbound traffic will be blocked and there's no estimate as to when the road will reopen. Some good news for drivers in Metro Vancouver this Easter long weekend. TransLink says the Patella Bridge has fully reopened in both directions, 2 days earlier than anticipated. The closure was to allow for work on the replacement bridge project, including soil densification activities, paving, and relocation of the seismic warning system. One of only 2 rabbit rescues in Metro Vancouver is at risk of being shut down at a time when rabbit surrenders are at an all-time high.
And this is Ringo and Sky, and their brother and sister, Dustin and Susie, are in here, and they were a litter of 7 from another accidental breeding. Very common thing. People gave their child a rabbit. They didn't really know anything about keeping rabbits.
Olga Betts is the founder of Vancouver Rabbit Rescue and Advocacy. She says her home is not zoned as a shelter, and the city has sent her a notice with bylaw infractions. The nonprofit educates people about rabbit care, shelters, neglected or abandoned bunnies, while offering foster and adoption services. Betts says many people still have misconceptions about keeping rabbits as house pets, adding the popularity of pet rabbits has grown during the pandemic and especially during the Easter season. Some Richmond residents had their neighborhood invaded by some surprise visitors last week. A flock of snow geese landed in the street and they weren't moving.
There's a couple of geese crossing the road and said, you know what, this is a nice spot, let's stop here. So we pulled over, parked, and we see a whole bunch of geese.
A wildlife conservationist believes the site isn't as unusual as it may seem. He says as geese migrate northward in groups, they may stop to rest in the lower mainland. Pope Francis renewed his calls for peace in Syria and Ukraine during his traditional Easter address. That story after the break. 100,000 people celebrated Easter Mass at the Vatican today. The Pope's message focused on the world's conflicts.
Aiuta l'amato popolo ucraino nel cammino verso la pace.
Pope Francis prayed for peace in Ukraine and for what he called the light of Easter to shine down on people of Russia. He also expressed worry over the Middle East's recent violence. Brilliant sunshine lit St. Peter's Square along with 38,000 flowers from the Netherlands. And barely a week out of the hospital, Pope Francis showed no apparent discomfort. Another showdown is taking shape in the U.S. on abortion. It began late Friday with a Texas court suspending approval of a long-standing abortion pill, and debate has waged through the weekend. The CBC's Katie Simpson reports.
The U.S. Supreme Court is likely going to face another significant decision on abortion, as a legal fight over the most commonly used abortion pill in the country is now underway.
For America's sake and for women's sake, we have to prevail in this.
The Biden administration is appealing a ruling by a Texas judge that after 23 years, mifepristone should be taken off the market, citing safety concerns from anti-abortion groups that are disputed by the FDA.
Just because the FDA has been getting it wrong for 23 years is not a reason to continue to get it wrong.
You're talking about insulin.
Opponents say this sets a dangerous precedent.
If a judge decides to substitute his preference, his personal opinion, for that of scientists and medical professionals, what drug isn't subject to some kind of legal challenge?
A judge in Washington state, just hours after the Texas decision, separately ruled there should be no restrictions on the drug. The competing decisions will kick the issue up to the High Court.
And the reality of our courts right now is very disturbing. This ruling is in extreme abuse of power.
This Democratic lawmaker says the FDA should ignore court-ordered bans on the drug. Republicans warn they'll use their majority in the House to ensure the FDA follows the law.
And it may become a point where House Republicans on the appropriations side have to defund FDA programs that don't make sense.
Protecting access to abortion is now a rallying cry for Democrats, repeatedly helping them win key elections, including one last week in the battleground state of Wisconsin. But some Republicans say this fight isn't over.
We can win this issue at the ballot box if we show up with reasonable positions. If we have our head in the sand, we're going to lose.
The drug in question is still available right now. The Texas judge issued a stay for the next week to allow the appeals process to get underway. There will likely be some back and forth, more decisions and more appeals as this makes its way to the Supreme Court. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
Syphilis cases in babies are soaring in many parts of the world, including Canada. Health Canada has approved a new rapid test that allows for early detection and treatment. But as the CBC's Ithil Musa reports, experts say vulnerable populations need better healthcare access.
It's not just on the rise, it's out of control.
Medical experts are alarmed at the soaring number of Canadian babies being born with syphilis. Syphilis cases are on the rise around the world, but among wealthy countries, Canada is seeing unusually dramatic growth. In 2021, cases of congenital syphilis were 13 times what they were in 2017, with prairie provinces experiencing the highest increases.
It's happening in communities where they're not getting tested and they're not getting access to the treatments.
Researcher Sean Rourke says Indigenous communities are particularly vulnerable.
We can't expect our healthcare system to work when people have to come in and they face these barriers of racism and structural, health inequities.
Wandell Windigo doesn't have syphilis, but she knows how challenging it can be for Indigenous people to get medical treatment. During her high-risk pregnancy, she would travel for hours to get prenatal care.
Sometimes some of my appointments were like 4 hours long. So to sit for 4 hours, then to travel home, that's a full 8-hour day.
That limited access is helping drive the outbreak in babies. But a new rapid test could change that. Health Canada has just approved a dual HIV syphilis test that detects the disease within a minute, allowing health providers to begin treatment right away.
It's something that really opens the door to opportunities for people who are not coming forward.
Health Canada says epidemiologists have also been dispatched to assist provinces in containing the disease. Idil Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
Here we have a very cool time lapse of the clouds rolling in over Vancouver this afternoon. Those clouds are here to stay for most of tomorrow. A hospital in Alaska gets an unusual visitor. That story is coming up next. Well, here's something you normally wouldn't see in a hospital: a moose in the lobby, not necessarily seeking care, but perhaps a snack. Earlier this week, a young moose strolled through the front doors of the medical facility in Anchorage, Alaska. It stopped and helped itself to the office plants, seemingly unaware of the attention it was getting. Security officers were eventually able to tell the moose to vamoose out the door. Staff say this isn't the first time a moose has visited the hospital, adding even bears have tried to get into the emergency room before. Well, that is your late news for this Sunday. Thank you so much for spending some of your Easter weekend with us. We hope you're having a great one. Thanks so much for watching. For news at any hour, you can always head to our website, cbc.ca/BC. Have a great night.